What if your garden could start feeding you in as little as 30 days, after months of waiting? Not after complicated care routines, but with plants that grow fast, produce steadily, and keep giving you food again and again from a single planting. That is the kind of garden most people actually need. Because a productive garden is not always about growing the rarest plant or filling every corner with something new. It is about choosing crops that truly earn their space. Some plants can be harvested young within a few weeks. Some allow you to pick leaves, pods, fruits, or herbs many times through the season. Some need very little attention once they are established, yet still give you a serious return in the kitchen. And when you choose the right crops, gardening becomes less stressful and much more rewarding. You are not constantly replanting. You are not constantly solving problems. You are simply growing food that fits into your life. So in this video, I'll share 9 plants that are worth growing almost every season. They are practical, productive, flavorful, and useful for everyday cooking. If you want a garden that gives more while demanding less, these are the crops I would start with. The first plant worth growing again and again is squash. And the reason is simple. Few vegetables can give you this much food from one plant. Once squash starts growing well, it can produce heavily through the warm season. In many gardens, summer squash can begin producing around 45 to 60 days after planting. Depending on the variety and weather, some fast-growing types may give young harvests even earlier. When conditions are right. That means you are not planting it for one small harvest. You are planting it once, then picking again and again. Another reason squash is so valuable is that it gives you options. When harvested young, the flesh is tender, mild, and easy to cook. You can saute it, grill it, add it to soups, mix it into stir-fries, or slice it into simple summer meals. If certain varieties are left to mature longer, they can become denser and better suited for storage, more like a winter squash. So the same crop can serve both fresh eating and longer-term kitchen use. Squash also earns its space because it grows with large leaves. Those leaves can help shade the soil, reduce moisture loss, and soften the heat on smaller plants nearby. This does not mean squash should cover everything. It can spread aggressively, so it needs room or careful training. But when managed well, it is one of the most generous crops you can grow. For anyone who wants a garden that gives a lot without needing constant replanting, squash is one of the easiest crops to justify. One strong plant can turn into many meals. The second plant I would always make room for is tomato. If there is one crop that shows the real difference between store-bought food and homegrown food, it is the tomato. A tomato picked fresh from the vine has a flavor that is hard to replace. It is sweeter. It is more aromatic. The texture is better. And most importantly, it actually tastes alive. Many tomatoes sold in stores are picked before they are fully ripe because they need to survive packing, shipping, and storage. That makes sense for transportation. But it often means the flavor is weaker by the time they reach your kitchen. Homegrown tomatoes are different because you can let them ripen on the plant. That is where the depth of flavor develops. For a large slicing tomato, one variety that many growers love is Cherokee Purple. It is known for its dark, purplish-brown color and rich flavor. Instead of tasting only sweet or only acidic, it gives a more balanced taste, with sweetness, brightness, and a deeper savory quality. That makes it excellent for simple eating. You do not need to do much with a tomato like this. Slice it onto bread, add a little salt, put it into a salad, or eat it fresh when it is fully ripe. Tomatoes do need more attention than some other crops. They usually need support, regular watering, and some protection from disease pressure, especially in humid conditions. But the reward is worth it. A healthy tomato plant can keep producing for weeks or even months in warm weather. So even though tomatoes are not the lowest maintenance crop on this list, they are one of the most satisfying. If you want a garden that changes the way you eat, grow tomatoes. They remind you why fresh food matters. The third plant worth growing every season is kale. Kale is one of those crops that may not look exciting at first, but once you understand how useful it is, it becomes hard to leave out of the garden. The biggest advantage of kale is that you do not harvest it only once. You can pick the outer leaves and allow the center of the plant to keep growing. That means one plant can feed you many times over a long period. In the right climate, kale can produce for months. It does especially well in cooler weather, and many varieties become sweeter after exposure to light frost. That is because cold conditions can change the balance of sugars in the leaves, making the flavor milder and less bitter. Kale is also practical because it is both food and structure. Some varieties have beautiful blue-green leaves, deep purple stems, or curled textures that make them attractive enough to grow in containers or edible landscapes. Flat leaf types can be especially useful because pests are easier to notice. If aphids appear, they are often visible on the leaves and can usually be washed off with a strong stream of water before the problem becomes severe. Another reason kale deserves a place in the garden is that it can support pollinators if allowed to flower. When overwintered plants bloom in spring, their yellow flowers can attract bees and other beneficial insects. And the flowers themselves are edible. So kale gives you leaves, beauty, resilience, and pollinator value. For a low-effort crop that keeps giving, kale is one of the best choices. The fourth plant I would always grow is garlic. Garlic may not give you the instant excitement of a tomato or the huge visible harvest of squash, but it is one of the most valuable crops you can put in the ground. The reason is simple. Garlic is used in almost every kitchen. It builds flavor in soups, sauces, roasted vegetables, stir-fries, marinades, dressings, and countless everyday meals. And when you grow it yourself, you are not just getting one fresh ingredient. You are growing a crop that can store for months. In most climates, garlic is planted in fall and harvested the following summer. That means it spends much of its life growing quietly while the rest of the garden is less active. Once harvested and cured properly, garlic becomes a long-term pantry crop. Hardneck garlic often stores for around 3 to 5 months. Softneck garlic can store even longer, sometimes 6 to 9 months or more under good conditions. That makes garlic very different from crops that must be eaten immediately. It gives you flavor long after the growing season has ended. Garlic also has another advantage. You do not need to plant seeds. You plant individual cloves. Each clove can grow into a full bulb, which means the crop is easy to understand once you learn the timing and basic care. The main things garlic needs are loose soil, good drainage, enough spacing, and patience. It is not a crop you have to fuss over every day. For anyone who wants a garden that supports real cooking, garlic is essential. It saves money, stores well, and adds depth to almost everything you eat. The fifth plant worth growing is a small fruited pepper. Not necessarily the biggest bell pepper, not necessarily the hottest chili, but a pepper that gives you many small fruits with strong flavor and steady production. Small peppers are often more useful than people expect. Because the fruits are smaller, the plant can usually produce a larger number of them over the season. That means instead of waiting for a few large peppers to size up, you can harvest small peppers again and again once the plant gets going. A good small pepper should have balance. It should not only be hot. It should also have sweetness, fruitiness, brightness, or a little tang. That kind of pepper is much more useful in the kitchen because you can eat it fresh, pickle it, cook it into sauces, or blend it into homemade hot sauce. Some small peppers have just enough heat to make food interesting without overpowering the whole dish. That makes them easier to use every day. They can be sliced into eggs, added to stir-fries, mixed into rice dishes, roasted with vegetables, or chopped into salsa. Another advantage is that many small fruited peppers continue producing late into the season if temperatures stay mild enough. In warm climates, they can be especially productive. In cooler climates, starting them early indoors can help give them a longer growing window. Peppers do need sunlight, warmth, and well-drained soil. They do not like sitting in cold, wet ground. But once established, many pepper plants are surprisingly steady. For a garden that gives flavor, color, and repeated harvests from a compact space, small peppers are an excellent choice. One healthy plant can supply dozens of meals with very little waste. The sixth plant I would grow again and again is pole beans. Pole beans are one of the best crops for people who want a lot of food from a small space. Instead of spreading across the ground like bush beans, pole beans climb. That means you can train them up a trellis, fence, arch, or simple vertical support and turn unused airspace into food production. This is especially helpful in small gardens, raised beds, and backyard growing spaces where every square meter matters. Once pole beans begin producing, they can keep giving you harvests over a long period. The more often you pick the young pods, the more the plant is encouraged to continue flowering and producing. So, this is another crop where you plant once and harvest many times. Pole beans are also easy to use in the kitchen. They can be steamed, stir-fried, added to soups, cooked with garlic, or served as a simple side dish. If you want harvesting to be easier, choose varieties with colorful pods, such as purple or yellow beans. They stand out against the green leaves, so you can spot them faster and avoid missing pods until they become too mature. Another reason pole beans are valuable is what they leave behind. At the end of the season, the vines, leaves, and stems can be chopped and laid back on the soil as organic matter. This helps protect the bed's surface and slowly feeds soil life as it breaks down. Pole beans are simple, productive, beautiful, and space efficient. For a low-maintenance crop that keeps giving through the season, they deserve a permanent place in the garden. The seventh plant that deserves a place in the garden is potato. Potatoes are not just another vegetable. They are one of the most practical food crops you can grow because they are filling, versatile, and rich in calories compared with many leafy or watery vegetables. That matters if your goal is not only to add flavor to meals, but to grow food that can actually support the table. Potatoes can be boiled, roasted, mashed, fried, baked, turned into soups, or used as the base of a simple meal. Few crops are this flexible in the kitchen. They are also easier to grow than many beginners expect. You do not need a complicated setup. You can grow potatoes in the ground, in raised beds, in large containers, or in grow bags. The basic idea is simple. Start with seed potatoes or sprouted potato pieces, plant them in loose soil, keep them covered as the plants grow, and make sure they receive steady moisture without becoming waterlogged. As the plant grows, more soil or mulch can be added around the stems. This helps protect developing tubers from sunlight and can encourage a better harvest. Potatoes are especially useful because they store better than many fresh vegetables when cured and kept in a cool, dark, well-ventilated place. That means they can keep feeding you after harvest day is over. They also give a satisfying return. A few planted pieces can turn into several pounds of food if the conditions are good. For people who want a garden that provides real substance, potatoes are hard to beat. They may grow quietly underground, but when harvest time comes, they often feel like buried treasure. The eighth thing I would always grow is not just one plant. It is herbs. If you want one simple change that can make your cooking taste better almost immediately, grow your own herbs. Fresh herbs can transform ordinary food. A plain soup becomes deeper. A simple salad becomes brighter. Roasted vegetables become more fragrant. Eggs, rice, beans, potatoes, sauces, and grilled dishes all become more interesting with just a handful of fresh leaves. The problem with buying herbs from the store is that they are often expensive for the amount you actually use. Many people buy a bunch of parsley, cilantro, basil, dill, or thyme, use a small part of it, and then watch the rest wilt in the refrigerator. When you grow herbs yourself, you only cut what you need. A few leaves of basil, a small handful of chives, a little thyme, some parsley for the end of a dish. That makes herbs one of the most cost-effective crops for a small garden, balcony, windowsill, or container setup. Herbs also give repeated harvests. Many of them respond well to regular cutting because pruning encourages fresh growth. Basil, mint, parsley, cilantro, dill, chives, thyme, sage, and oregano can all play different roles in the kitchen. Some are annuals, some are perennials, some like heat, some prefer cooler weather. So instead of thinking of herbs as one crop, think of them as a year-round flavor system. Even a small herb corner can make home cooking feel fresher and more intentional. For beginners, herbs are also a great confidence builder. You do not need a huge garden. You do not need perfect equipment. You just need a small space, enough light, and the habit of harvesting regularly. If you want more flavor with less effort, start with herbs. They may be small, but their impact in the kitchen is huge. The ninth plant I would always grow is a smaller tomato type, especially cherry tomatoes or currant tomatoes. Large slicing tomatoes are wonderful, but they are not always the easiest choice for every climate. In areas with short summers, cool springs, or early fall weather, big tomatoes may take too long to ripen. That is where smaller tomatoes become extremely useful. Cherry tomatoes and currant tomatoes usually ripen faster than large beefsteak types. Because each fruit is small, the plant can mature them more quickly, giving you a better chance of harvesting ripe tomatoes before the season changes. They are also highly productive. A healthy cherry tomato plant can produce long clusters of fruit over many weeks. You can pick a handful for salads, snacks, sauces, roasted dishes, or fresh eating straight from the bowl. Dark-colored cherry varieties are especially interesting because they often have a deeper, sweeter, slightly smoky flavor compared with ordinary red types. Currant tomatoes are even smaller, but they can be packed with flavor. The plants may grow vigorously and need space or support, but the harvest can be surprisingly generous. Another advantage of small tomatoes is end-of-season management. When cold weather approaches, clusters of unripe fruit can often be cut and brought indoors to finish ripening more easily than large individual tomatoes. So if your season is unpredictable, small tomatoes are a smart backup crop. And before we finish, there is one bonus plant worth mentioning: calendula. Calendula is useful because it brings color to the garden, attracts pollinators, and produces edible petals that can be used in salads, teas, and simple kitchen preparations. So those are the 9 plants I would grow again and again. Squash, tomatoes, kale, garlic, small peppers, pole beans, potatoes, herbs, and smaller tomatoes. They are productive, practical, flavorful, and useful in everyday cooking. If you want a garden that gives more food with less stress, start with crops like these. Plant once, harvest many times, and let your garden work harder for you.